In 1901, the greatest contract in the history of Australia was entered into by two enormous entities. The first was the Queen of England. Back then, it was Queen Victoria. The second was the people of Australia. Once that contract was entered into, it bound everybody. It bound us in perpetuity. It bound our children. It bound her children and her heirs. That contract was called the Commonwealth Constitution of Australia, 1900. It still exists, and it still binds you. The name of the greatest contract ever entered into in Australia. The Commonwealth of Australia Constitution Act 1901 is its official title. There is no other constitution. That's the Commonwealth Constitution. In addition to the Commonwealth Constitution, and more particularly prior to the Commonwealth Constitution, Victoria and every other state had their own constitution. However, from 1901, the Constitution for the Commonwealth is the Commonwealth of Australia Constitution Act 1901. Anything else is a fraud. What does it mean to be bound? Once this contract was executed, all of the people of Australia were bound to the terms and conditions of this contract. Similarly, the Queen, her heirs, in perpetuity were bound. In Australia, what that means is if you are standing on Australian soil, this contract, the Commonwealth Constitution of Australia, binds you. It binds you if you're a judge. It binds you if you're a politician. It binds you if you're just an average person walking down the street. It even binds you if you're a visitor to our country. It binds anybody who sets foot on our soil. What does in perpetuity mean? It means forever. Forever and ever and ever. Never stops, never changes. It goes on from the minute it's executed. It goes on till the end of time. The only way this contract can be terminated is by the joint agreement of the parties, both parties. That's the Crown and the people of Australia. Otherwise, forever and ever, if you're standing on our soil, this contract binds you. Can't be broken. Now, the only way you can break this contract without the agreement of both parties is if you declare war. That's it. Otherwise, the contract remains intact, exactly the way it was written, unless it's amended by both parties. So we got this fabulous contract, biggest contract in the history of the country. What for? Why? What was the purpose of the contract? Well, it was to set the boundaries and the terms and conditions under which all Australians would inhabit this country. It's the rules. It's the conditions under which we want to live. How do we set up our judiciary? How do we vote for politicians? What can we do? What can't we do? In short, it's the template, the formula that we can turn to remind us of what we all agreed we wanted to achieve in this country when we decided to become a country. For the benefit of the people. Now, you may have heard the saying, written by the people, for the people. Now, in 1901, the word for meant something different to what it means to most of us today. Back then, it meant those in favour. For example, those for, those against. Those in favour meant for you. Therefore, no law or rule could be written and passed and become law in this country unless it was in favour of us, not against us. The laws were not written for you. They were written for you. Totally different. Can you see? Rules are rules. Why is that? Well, when we wrote this Constitution, and when we signed it, and when we agreed to comply with it, it set out very clearly exactly how everything would be done in Australia. For example, it established exactly how we vote for or elect our politicians, exactly what our politicians can and can't do. It also set out exactly how we vote for our judiciary. How is a judge appointed? Is there a system? Can the system be bypassed? And the answer is no. Rules are rules. If you do something that's not absolutely in accordance with the rules of our Constitution, it's void every time. How to elect a politician, according to the Commonwealth Constitution of Australia, 1900. Well, there is a process, and only one. It begins like this. Let's understand that every parliament is Her Majesty's Parliament. She sets it up, and she sits at the top of Parliament. Underneath her sits her Governor-General. That's the guy she elected to pretty much keep an eye on us Aussies. Here's how we elect a politician. First, the Queen, through her Governor-General, calls an election. Then, we the people select somebody to represent us. Now that's important, because we don't select somebody to represent a party, because who cares about a party? We care about ourselves. A politician in this country is supposed to represent us. And the one you vote for, in particular, is supposed to represent you. You're supposed to have someone in Parliament that's actually speaking for you, for your constituency, for your area, for your suburb, for your family. And I've got one that represents me. And everyone else has one that represents them. They're representatives. They are elected by us, but they sit in Her Majesty's Parliament. Now, if anybody else comes along and tells you different, they're either lying or trying to sell you something. How are judges appointed? Well, that depends on what legal system you're talking about. Because what you may not know is there's not one legal system operating in Australia at the same time. There's more. And that's why it's confusing. Because everybody thinks there's one and we can't understand it. So we all think it's magic or voodoo. Now that you know there's more, you can see why you can't understand it, because they conflict. The different legal systems conflict. And what are these legal structures? Well, the first one, the best one, the one that we should be interested in, is called common law. That pertains to anybody who's standing on Australian soil and is a living human being. If that's you, then you're subject to common law, whether you like it or not. The second one is corporate law, or maritime law, or summary. Any one of these words describe the same thing. It refers to a legal system that operates off the land, not on the land, on the sea. It's a ship on the sea. That law is different. And judges in that court are elected differently from the way they're elected in common law. So let's start with common law. In common law, remember what we said. The Queen sits at the top of everything. And so what she does is she appoints the judges. Now we give her an indication of who we would like, because we say, look, we recommend this fellow, he's a good fellow, he's an upstanding member of our society. We think he should be a magistrate, or we think he's smart enough he could be a county court judge, or perhaps he could be a Supreme Court judge. That's okay. We do that. We put up some names. And then our Queen, through her Governor General, remember who he is, he looks after everything while she's not here, he selects one of those. And then he gives them a job for life. But in maritime law, it doesn't work like that. You don't get to say who the captain of the ship is. It's whoever owns the ship. Whoever owns the ship appoints the captain. So if you find yourself in a courtroom that's a maritime courtroom, you can forget all the laws of the land. None of them apply. None. No human rights, no legal rights, no common law, because you're no longer on the land. You need to be on the land to use common law. All your human rights apply whilst your feet are standing on terra firma. The minute you set foot into that ocean, you're in the Sea of Commerce. And once you enter the Sea of Commerce, no rules. No boundaries, no borders. Captain of the ship is the law. And you have no common law rights. So the idea, clearly, is keep your feet on solid ground. It's dangerous out there. All right. So let's say we're standing on terra firma. Who makes the laws, and how are laws made, and who's bound by those laws? Well, let's start by who makes the laws. Well, believe it or not, we do. We're supposed to. Remember, by the people, for the people. We make laws for our benefit in common law. How are laws made? How is a law made? These are the steps. Number one of us, somebody in the community, has to think up a law. Something that benefits the community. Something that we could all agree to that's of use. So we come up with a law. we take that law to our representative in the House of Representatives? Remember, that's the people that we voted for. That's somebody that represents us. And we say to that person, we would have this law. Please vote on it. Make it happen. So then all the people who are sitting in the House of Representatives, they get together, they write the law, they read the law, and when they're happy, they vote. And if you get a majority of votes, it goes up to the Senate. Now in the Senate, exactly the same thing happens. In the Senate, the people that sit there are also our representatives. We voted for them as well. And they're supposed to represent our interests. And now they've received a document saying we want a particular law. They read it. They notice that it was approved by the House of Representatives. And if they agree, they approve it. Now, it's not a law yet, but it's getting there. Then it goes from there to the judiciary. Our senior judges read it to make sure that it's not nonsense, to make sure that it's lawful, to make sure that it doesn't hurt anybody or break any of our existing common laws. If they're satisfied, they approve it, and it goes to the Queen. Because in this country, while you're standing on her solid ground, only a law that our Queen has approved binds us. We are not bound by laws of men. Only our Queen can make a law. We can recommend it, but we can't make it law. No man can bind another man. We're all equal, we're all free. But our Queen, she's got the edge. She can. She can bind us under the Constitution. So, if the Queen is presented with a law that the people have asked for, and she believes it's in keeping with the Constitution, it's in favour of the people, she may give it her royal assent. And the minute she does that, it binds us. If she doesn't, there is no law that binds you while you're standing on her good earth. You can ignore them all. They're called void. What is the con? At some point in our history, somewhere between 1901 and today, a bunch of very powerful, very rich, and I might say rather nasty individuals decided that this beautiful country that we have, with all of our riches, our vast open spaces, the opportunities that abound in Australia, well, they wanted it. They wanted all of it. And the problem they had is a bunch of pesky Aussies scattered about the place. So they needed to deal with it. And what they did was they said, how do we take over Australia without anybody realising what we're doing? Because if they realise what we're doing, clearly the Australians would do something about it. And of course we would. So what they did is they came up with a very cunning plan, and they enacted it over a long period of time so that generations wouldn't realise what had happened, in ever so tiny increments. The first thing they did is they set up their own parliamentary structure. Now, it sounds crazy, but that's what they did. They elected their own politicians and convinced us that they were our politicians. But they weren't elected under the terms and conditions of the Commonwealth Constitution. And what have we said? Unless you elect a politician in accordance with the Commonwealth of Australia Constitution, they're not politicians. They don't bind us. These people set up their own parliament, not under our Queen, but under their own Queen, a corporate Queen of that. Just a name they came up with and they registered and incorporated. They actually called her Queen Elizabeth II, Queen of Australia. Right on top of Queen Elizabeth II, Queen of the UK and Ireland and all of her other dominions. Queen of Australia is no such person. Any political structure that's set up under the Queen of Australia doesn't bind you and I. Our Queen is the Queen of England. Any political structure that's set up under the Queen of Australia doesn't bind you and I. Our Queen is the Queen of England. And so that's the first step. The first step is they set up their own pretend government right alongside the real government. Then slowly but surely, they forgot about the real Parliament and they started acting as though they were the real Parliament. And the people of Australia didn't get it. And we played along. Because it's just such a diabolical plot that no normal, sensible human being would even suspect for one moment that anyone would do such a thing. But this is the type of people they are. They do these sorts of things. This is what they do every day of the week. You and I don't get it. You and I don't get it. But they do this. And that's what they did. Then, once they got their own parliament established, they started rubber stamping their own laws. Now, these laws were written by the people, that'd be them, for the people. That means us. So they would write the laws that suited them, that we were subject to, according to them. And unfortunately, nobody told us. Nobody told us. We didn't know. We thought we were still having our laws passed by our Queen, and that for some reason she decided that they were laws for the people of Australia, but they weren't. So that's the first part. Elect your own parliament and start making your own laws and convince the people that you're a legitimate parliament and you're making legitimate laws for them. The second thing that they did was they created their own judiciary. Now remember what I said. There are two types of legal structures in Australia. The first one is common law, the second one is maritime law. So what they did was they replaced all of our common law courts with maritime courts. Nobody spotted it. Not even I, to be honest, when they first did it. I know it now, just like you do. So in a maritime court, all of the rights that a human being has under common law, freedoms, liberties, they're all gone. They don't exist in a maritime court. Maritime court deals with contracts only, dead entities, corporations, that sort of thing. The third thing they did was they took over the civil service. Now, what's the civil service? Well, in the beginning, Her Majesty had an executive government that she ran through her Governor-General. Nobody we elected. These were people, these were ministers. Minister for Health, Minister for Finance. All of these ministers were appointed by the Queen, and their job was to keep Australia running, regardless of which politician was elected on any particular year. And so this executive government, this branch of the Queen, appointed civil servants. Their job was to look after us, to run the trains, the roads, the common area, a bit like a body corporate. Now this civil service was hijacked and taken over by these sinister individuals. And today, there is no civil service left. Everybody who is doing the job that a civil servant used to do now works for a corporation. And which corporation do they work for? Well, the guys that pulled off this entire con. So everything that was Her Majesty's civil service, the police force, the army, the navy, the judiciary, the post office, All of that belonged to the people and was run by the people, for the people, at a certain time after the Constitution was enacted. That began to change. And today, there is nothing left of the civil service. Every single person that you think is a civil servant is actually a private company running that job. Your police force, they're a corporation. They don't work for you. They don't work for the Crown. They work for the individual who pays them. The same goes with the judiciary, because they're not a common law judiciary. Her Majesty didn't appoint these judges. These are maritime judges, appointed by a corporation. Whoever owns the ship appoints the captain, and so on. The Army, the Navy, your municipal councils, all of these entities that think they have some sort of power and some sort of authority claim to derive that power and that authority from the Commonwealth Constitution, because they know you and I are loyal to that Constitution. But the truth is that they do not stand under the Constitution, and they have not been elected constitutionally. They are frauds. It's a con. It's a huge con. It's been going for a century, but it's a con nonetheless. And now that we are aware of what is happening, we can take steps to rectify it. Okay, let's summarise. In 1901, Australia was made up of a number of states. We weren't a cohesive force. And we realised that we were living in the best country in the world. Make no mistake. Everything you could want, we've got. Surrounded by beaches. What a place. No enemies. Onshore. But not so offshore. Indeed, most of the world had their eyes on Australia. And we knew it. So we needed to protect ourselves. And that's one of the reasons why we entered into the greatest contract in Australia with the Queen. Because the Queen had something we wanted. Not only did she have a well-established legal structure and framework for running a country, which was useful, but she also had a navy, an army, and an air force. The British Navy, the British Army, and the British Air Force. And they weren't to be scoffed at. They were serious dudes. And we knew that if we made an alliance with our Queen, and we honoured her wishes, she would protect us. Protect us from what? Well, from invasion. Since then, we've been under attack. We are currently being invaded. Now, it's not the traditional way, because we were protected from that. But clearly, what we didn't see was the sinister invasion, the underhanded cloak and dagger techniques used by our opponent, coming in here and tricking us into handing over control of the country to them. The only thing that stands between us and slavery is the Commonwealth of Australia Constitution. When we lose that, we lose everything.